Imagine you've just made, like, a catastrophic mistake.
Oh, wow. Okay, starting heavy.
Yeah, I mean, not just a minor slip-up, like a conscious, deliberate betrayal that completely ruins your most important relationship.
Right, the kind of thing you can't just apologize away.
Exactly. You've burned the bridge, you're standing in the ashes, and you're just waiting for the hammer to fall.
Which is the natural expectation, right?
Yeah.
You break something, you pay for it.
But instead of just punishing you, the person you wronged steps forward. And right there, in the middle of the wreckage, they outline this detailed, agonizing, but absolutely guaranteed plan to fix everything.
Yeah, and the crazy part is they do it entirely at their own expense.
It's an incredibly jarring image, isn't it? It completely upends how we naturally think about consequences.
It really does. I mean, human instinct tells us that when we break something, we have to grovel. We have to, earn our way back into the good graces of the person we betrayed.
Right. We want to fix it ourselves.
Exactly. But the theological framework we are exploring today presents a paradigm that is the exact opposite of that human instinct.
And that is the gravity of the text we are diving into today. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Glad to be here for this one. It's a huge topic.
It is. We are looking at Genesis 3.15, which is literally just one sentence. One single sentence spoken in arguably the darkest moment of human history.
Yeah, but according to the research we're unpacking today from theologian Chris Velasquez, that one sentence isn't just a throwaway line of comfort.
Right.
It is actually the decoder ring for the entire Bible.
Right.
Theologians call it the first gospel promise.
The first gospel promise. I love that. And to really do this justice, we're looking at Velasquez's work alongside these incredibly dense, beautifully structured visual maps of biblical history.
Those maps are amazing, by the way. They really help visualize this stuff.
They really do. They trace how this one singular promise starts in eternity past, threads its way through thousands of years of human failure, and anchors the ultimate final renewal of the universe.
So, if you're listening to this and you have ever felt like the world is just, irreversibly fractured.
Which, let's be honest, is a pretty common feeling these days.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or if you've ever viewed the Bible as this disjointed collection of ancient moral fables, like Aesop's fables, but with more sand and sandals,
Right.
then this deep dive is going to fundamentally shift your perspective. We are going to look at how God's justice and mercy are not these two competing forces at war with each other.
And how the ultimate rescue mission was initiated before humanity even had the sense to ask for it.
Yeah, but to understand the sheer scale of that rescue mission, we can't just start with the rescue itself.
Right. We have to understand the height from which humanity fell.
Exactly. We have to establish the setting of those first 3 chapters of Genesis. A really crucial point that Velasquez makes right out of the gate is that humanity wasn't just made to exist.
We weren't just put in a cosmic terrarium to breathe and eat.
No, not at all. We were made for communion, dominion, and life in God's direct presence.
Right, the creation mandate. The term that jumped out at me from the notes is gardener kings.
Yes, gardener kings.
Which honestly sounds a bit like a contradictory job title. But it's not just agricultural work, is it?
Not even a little bit. It's a deeply theological vocation. Adam and Eve were supposed to reflect God's character and extend his blessing outward.
So we have to strip away this Sunday school image of Adam just wandering around, petting giraffes and picking apples.
Definitely.
Yeah.
In the ancient Near Eastern context and in the biblical text, Adam is a covenant head. He's a representative.
Okay, a representative.
Yeah, humanity's vocation was priestly and royal. They were stationed in Eden to guard sacred space. So when we arrive at the narrative of the fall in Genesis 3, we have to recognize the immense weight of what is actually happening.
It wasn't a bad choice about dietary restriction.
No, it was high treason.
Okay, let me pause you right there because we really need to completely dismantle the cultural caricature of this story.
Oh, the cultural understanding is almost comical.
It really is. It's a talking snake, an apple, a slap on the wrist, and suddenly everyone has to wear clothes.
Right, it completely misses the point.
But what we're looking at describes the fall as a complete rupture of communion. It was an act of profound, calculated distrust.
Yeah, it was a surrender to the serpent's lie, which was designed to inflame human autonomy. Look at the psychology of the temptation.
Right. The serpent doesn't just say, eat this, it tastes good.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The serpent questions God's word. Did God really say? And then distorts God's character, implying that God is holding out on them.
So Eve and Adam reached for wisdom apart from obedience?
They decided they wanted to be the arbiters of good and evil, rather than trusting the Creator who defined those terms in the first place.
And the tragic irony is that the immediate consequence of grasping for that autonomy wasn't enlightenment.
No, it's total alienation.
The text highlights this so vividly. The immediate fallout isn't that they suddenly understand the secrets of the universe. It's shame, fear, blame, and death.
And death here is dual-layered, right?
Right. It's physical. God explicitly says, dust you are, and to dust you shall return, in Genesis 3:19. But it's also a spiritual death, a severing.
And that severing is absolute. The human race essentially falls under the serpent's deceptive influence. It is a total, catastrophic collapse of the human vocation.
The gardener kings are suddenly hiding in the bushes like terrified children.
Yeah, they are desperately trying to cover their own shame with fig leaves. When confronted, Adam blames Eve and implicitly blames God for giving him Eve.
Wow, yeah, the woman you gave me.
Exactly. And then Eve blames the serpent. Everyone is just pointing fingers.
Which brings us to the moment, right here, literally right in the middle of handing down this devastating judgment as the gavel is falling. God speaks Genesis 3:15.
Right.
He looks at the serpent and says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel.
Now let's look at the mechanics of this because it is staggering. Why does it matter that this promise is spoken as a declaration of covenantal warfare?
Notice the audience. God isn't pulling Adam and Eve aside for a pep talk.
No, he isn't making a polite suggestion. He is speaking directly to the adversary who just orchestrated this coup.
Wait, that is actually a massive distinction. God doesn't look at Adam and say, okay, here's your 10-step rehabilitation plan to fix this mess.
Right. He bypasses humanity completely in that moment and issues a declaration of war against the serpent.
Precisely. God is taking absolute unilateral responsibility for the rescue.
He steps into the breach and says, I will put enmity. This introduces one of the most profound theological concepts in the entire biblical narrative, antecedent grace.
Antecedent grace, let's break that down for the listener. Antecedent meaning grace that comes before.
Yes. It means God acts and seeks before humans even have the wherewithal to ask for forgiveness.
Right, because remember the setting. Adam and Eve weren't repenting.
Not at all. They weren't crying out for a savior. They were hiding, dodging accountability, and fully alienated.
So grace begins entirely in God's mercy, not in human initiative.
Exactly. He speaks the promise of a deliverer into the darkness before humanity even comprehends the depths of the darkness they've plunged themselves into.
It makes me think of a house fire. Genesis 3:15 is like sifting through the still smoldering ashes of a completely burned down house. Everything is ruined, but right there in the ash, you find a single, indestructible, glowing seed. It's tiny. It's literally just one sentence in the text.
But absolutely everything that will ever grow back, every beam of timber for the new house, every structural support of the rescue mission comes entirely from that one seed. I love that image because the seed contains the entire genetic code of the fully grown tree. Velazquez describes this as the first beam of redemptive light in a world gone dark.
It really is the embryonic form of every single covenant and promise that will follow in Scripture.
It is.
But, okay, if this promise is the seed that rebuilds the house, I think any logical person listening to this has to ask the obvious question.
Which is,
did God just invent this seed on the spot? Like, was he caught off guard by the fire? Did he look down, see Adam eating the fruit, and scrambled to come up with a plan B to save his project?
that is the exact tension this framework addresses next. And the theology here is emphatic. Salvation was never at any point an afterthought.
Okay.
Before the physical world was even spoken into existence, God was already God. The first gospel promise in Eden isn't divine improvisation. It is simply the historical unveiling of an eternal purpose.
There is some really heavy scriptural backup for this that we need to touch on. 1 Peter 1:20 explicitly says that the Lamb was foreknown before the foundation of the world.
Right.
And Ephesians 1:4 talks about believers being chosen before the foundation. This completely dismantles the idea of divine damage control. God didn't just pivot.
Exactly. When you zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture, it completely reframes the creation mandate we talked about earlier.
Humanity was created good, specifically for God's glory.
Yeah, so the fall wasn't a minor hiccup that forced God into crisis management. It was a catastrophic inversion of order, yes, But it was an inversion that God already possessed the eternal blueprint to resolve.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because I know exactly what you're thinking if you're driving in your car listening to this right now.
Go for it.
You're thinking, wait a minute. If the blueprints for the rescue existed before the house was even built, doesn't that imply God knew the house was going to burn down? Why even build it?
That is a very common question.
You're right. Like, why put the tree in the garden at all if he knew they were going to fail?
It is the ultimate philosophical pushback, and it's a completely fair question. Now, to be clear, theology doesn't attempt to exhaustively solve the profound mystery of the origin of evil,
Sure.
but what this framework does provide is a deeply rooted theological anchor. Before the clock of history even started ticking, God purposed to glorify himself in the full spectrum of his attributes, specifically in both mercy and justice.
Let me make sure I'm tracking with this. Meaning, you cannot fully demonstrate mercy if there is no brokenness to heal.
Exactly.
If I never do anything wrong, I can never experience the depth of your forgiveness. And you can't demonstrate justice if there is no rebellion to right.
That's the core of it. Creation is the stage on which this grand eternal purpose unfolds. The fall, terrible as it is, allows for the full spectrum of God's character to be revealed to his creation.
So the rescue mission wasn't a panicked reaction to sin.
No, it was the predetermined mechanism through which ultimate, indestructible joy and divine glory would be achieved.
Wow. Okay, so knowing this was always the eternal plan, let's look closer at the actual mechanics of this promise in Genesis 3.15, because this isn't just a vague, hey, don't worry, things will get better eventually.
Right. It's incredibly specific.
Yeah. How exactly does this eternal rescue operation work? What is the actual anatomy of this sentence?
Well, we can break the anatomy of this promise down into three core theological principles. The first principle is that the promise is simultaneously messianic and corporate.
Okay, that sounds like seminary jargon. Break that down for us. You're talking about the phrase, seed of the woman.
Right. In the original language, the word for seed, or offspring, functions a lot like the English word sheep.
Oh, like it can be singular or plural.
Exactly. It can be plural, pointing to a whole flock, a line of descendants. That's the corporate dimension. Throughout history, there will be a lineage of people clinging to this promise.
Right, the people of God.
But the grammar also points to one specific, singular, representative individual, the Messiah.
Okay, so the history of redemption is going to unfold through a broad group of people, but that group will eventually funnel down to one decisive person who acts on their behalf.
Precisely.
Stop right there, because this touches on the concept of federal headship, which is crucial, but super confusing for a lot of people.
It can be, yeah.
We mentioned earlier that Adam was a covenant head. For anyone unfamiliar, it's a bit like a president or an ambassador, right?
That's a good way to look at it.
When an ambassador signs a treaty, they aren't just signing for themselves. Their signature legally binds the entire nation they represent.
That is a brilliant way to explain it. Adam was the first ambassador, the first head of humanity.
And when he rebelled, he signed a treaty with death, and the whole human line he represented fell with him.
Yes. So the rescue mission requires a new ambassador, a new head, what the Apostle Paul later calls the second Adam.
And this second Adam acts on behalf of a new humanity. He has to succeed where the first ambassador failed.
Exactly.
But to accomplish that, we hit the second core principle of Genesis 3.15, and this is where it gets really gritty. Victory comes through suffering.
This is perhaps the most shocking element of the promise. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel.
We absolutely love the head-crushing part.
Oh, we love the imagery of total victory.
Yeah.
But the bruised heel is just as critical.
It is the part that I think catches modern readers completely off guard. We want a Superman who deflects bullets, but this text says the deliverer is going to bleed.
It is central to the entire biblical narrative. Philosophy explicitly warns against triumphalist fantasies, what theologians call theologies of glory.
Theologies of glory. I haven't heard that phrase much.
Yeah, a theology of glory wants the crown without the cross. It wants victory without pain. But Genesis 3.15 establishes that the deliverer will not conquer by avoiding suffering, but through it.
Right, the wound isn't an accident.
No, it is the actual means of salvation.
I want to linger on this because it's so counterintuitive. Does the bruised heel just mean the hero barely survives the fight?
Not exactly, no.
Because when I hear that, it makes me think of a firefighter running into a burning building to save someone. It's not that the firefighter tripped on the way out and accidentally scraped their knee.
Right.
It's that a burning support beam was blocking the exit. And the absolute only way to get you out was for the firefighter to let that beam fall on their own back.
That's powerful.
So the severe burn they suffer isn't a side effect of the rescue. Enduring the fire on their own body was the mechanism of getting you out.
That is a profoundly accurate analogy. The injury is the mechanism of the rescue. This corrects so many shallow understandings of how Jesus defeats evil.
He doesn't defeat evil by remaining aloof in the heavens and waving a magic wand.
Exactly. He defeats death by entering into it and overturning it from the inside out. He takes the venom of the serpent, the full weight of the curse, into himself.
The heel must be bruised before the head can be crushed.
Yes, it is substitutionary suffering.
Which naturally leads to the third principle found in this incredible sentence. Hope is established right in the middle of judgment.
Notice the sequencing here. God speaks this ultimate hope, but he doesn't immediately lift the curse from the ground.
Right. He still looks at Adam and says, "Dust you are, and to dust you shall return."
The pain of childbirth, the toil of farming, the reality of physical death, those remain real. But the hope is spoken inside the judgment.
It's a masterful demonstration that God's justice and his mercy are not competing forces.
No, they meet and embrace right there in the garden. God doesn't cancel his justice to show mercy. His justice actually frames the hope.
I think this has massive implications for how we process life.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're listening to this and you're going through a season of intense suffering, or you're dealing with the consequences of your own bad decisions, the natural instinct is to think, God is punishing me, God has abandoned me.
Right. But this principle teaches that the God who judges sin is the exact same God who initiates salvation.
The hard realities of life in a fallen world, the toil, the sickness, the discipline, they aren't evidence of God's absence.
No, they are the actual content in which this promised redemption is working itself out. You don't have to escape your reality to find God's grace. His grace meets you in the middle of the ashes.
So God has laid out this breathtaking eternal blueprint. A representative seed, a second Adam, who will win a decisive victory through agonizing substitutionary suffering, offering unshakable hope right in the middle of a cursed world. But here's where we have to zoom out. How does this actually play out in real time? Because Adam and Eve eventually die, and the seed hasn't shown up yet.
Right. There's a lot of history between Eden and the New Testament.
Let's trace how this single glowing seed in the ashes grows into a massive sprawling orchard across thousands of years of human history.
This is where the visual timelines you are studying become incredibly helpful. They map out the grand narrative of Scripture.
Yeah, the story moves from this embryonic, cryptic announcement in Eden through a series of sweeping historical covenants.
And what you see, century after century, is the line of promise systematically narrowing and getting more defined.
It starts really broad, right? After Eden, humanity spirals into violence, leading to the flood, but God makes a covenant with Noah.
And Noah isn't the seed who crushes the serpent.
Right. The Noah covenant is essentially God preserving the physical world so the story can even continue. It's God saying, I won't destroy the stage before the final act is played out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Noah secures the platform. But then the promise dramatically narrows. God calls a single man, Abraham, out of paganism.
He tells Abraham, through your specific seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed.
Yes. So the corporate line is now defined.
Then it narrows again. From Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to the 12 tribes, becoming the nation of Israel. And God brings them to Mount Sinai and gives them the law.
But the law isn't the rescue, is it?
No, the law is more like an MRI machine.
That's a great way to put it. The law shows the severity of the disease. It shows Israel, and by extension humanity, that they cannot achieve the righteousness required to dwell in God's presence.
But alongside the law, God gives them the sacrificial system, the tabernacle.
Yes. Let's talk about the Exodus and the sacrificial system, because this isn't just ancient trivia.
No, this is the blueprint from Genesis 3.15 playing out in 3D.
Think about it. The Israelites are slaves in Egypt. The angel of death is coming. And the only way they survive is by taking a lamb without blemish, slaughtering it, and putting its blood on their doorposts.
It is the bruised heel in historical preview.
Exactly. The Exodus becomes the defining historical pattern of this promise.
Mm-hmm.
You have bondage to a tyrant, you have the substitutionary blood of a lamb, and you have divine deliverance.
Every single sacrificed lamb on the altar, every drop of blood, every priestly intercession in the temple year after year, it is all a deafening whisper that the ultimate, final serpent crusher is coming.
And the lens keeps zooming in. From the nation of Israel, it narrows specifically to the tribe of Judah.
And from Judah, it narrows to the line of King David.
God makes a covenant with David, promising that a king from his physical lineage will sit on a throne whose kingdom will be established forever.
But there is a profound, agonizing tension here.
Yes, there really is.
Because as the promise gets more specific, the people entrusted with it keep failing spectacularly. David commits adultery and murder. His son Solomon falls into idolatry. The kings that follow become increasingly corrupt.
It feels a bit like a sprawling, multi-generational movie franchise.
Yeah, you keep getting these prequels, these spin-offs, these deep lore world-building episodes, the Exodus, the Kings, the Judges, but they are all aggressively pointing toward a final, singular climax.
You cannot understand the spin-offs without knowing the main plot.
And the main plot is always Genesis 3.15.
Right. And as the kings fail, the prophets step onto the stage to intensify the anticipation. The prophets realize that a mere human king with a sword isn't going to fix the curse of Eden.
So Isaiah starts adding shocking details.
He does. He talks about a virgin-born son who will be called God with us, but he also talks about a suffering servant, a servant who is pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities.
Crushed, the bruised heel again.
Exactly. Ezekiel talks about God himself coming to be the shepherd of his people because the human shepherds have preyed on the flock.
But despite all these warnings and promises, the covenant line of Israel absolutely refuses to listen.
They plunge into idolatry, which leads to the most traumatic event in the Old Testament, the exile.
We cannot skip over the emotional and spiritual weight of the exile. Babylon comes in, destroys Jerusalem, burns the temple to the ground, and drags the people away in chains.
Yeah, for a listener, try to imagine the sheer devastation of this. They thought they were the chosen people. They had the temple. They had the promised land.
And suddenly, they are slaves in a foreign empire. It must have felt like Genesis 3.15 was a lie.
It was a catastrophic identity crisis. But the exile is a critical theological milestone
Why is that?
because it proves, once and for all, that external covenant membership isn't enough to fix the root problem. The law on stone tablets couldn't change their hearts.
Right, because eventually, after 70 years, they are allowed to return. They go back to Jerusalem. They rebuild a smaller, less impressive temple.
The physical land is inhabited again. They have their geography back.
But it's hollow. The spiritual reality hasn't caught up.
That is exactly the point. The prophets note that the deeper slavery of sin remains. The serpent's venom is still pumping through their veins.
So returning to a geographic location doesn't cure the human heart.
No, it demands a deliverer who doesn't just restore political borders, who doesn't just kick out the Romans or the Babylonians, but who actually destroys the dominion of sin itself.
So you have thousands of years of hints, shadows, bruised heels, massive failures, and excruciating waiting.
These stages set.
And then finally, the narrative coalesces into a single moment in a backwater town in the Roman Empire. The seed arrives.
The climax of the entire timeline, Jesus of Nazareth, the historical and theological culmination of everything we've discussed.
He is the seed of the woman miraculously born of Mary without a human father, as Paul writes in Galatians 4.4.
Right. He's the son of David, holding the legal right to the throne. He's the suffering servant Isaiah foresaw.
And what I find so fascinating is that when you read the Gospels through the lens of Genesis 3.15, Jesus' entire life is a direct, active confrontation with serpent power.
This isn't just a metaphor.
No. Let's look at the wilderness temptation. Why does Jesus go into the desert to fast for 40 days and be tempted by the devil?
Because he is mathematically reversing the failure of the first Adam. Think about the contrast. Adam was in a lush, perfect garden with every conceivable physical need met, and he still rebelled.
Right.
Jesus goes into a starving, desolate wilderness, faces the exact same ancient adversary, and holds the line. He trusts the word of the Father. He refuses autonomy.
And then his public ministry begins, and it's essentially a military campaign.
It really is.
When he is healing the sick, when he is exorcising demons, he isn't just doing magic tricks to prove he's God. He's actively pushing back the kingdom of the adversary. He is binding the strong man and plundering his house.
But of course, this earthly confrontation reaches its brutal, inevitable apex at the cross.
The cross is the bruised heel.
It is the ultimate bruising. It is the moment where the serpent seemingly strikes a lethal, decisive blow. The seed is nailed to wood, cursed, bleeding, and dead.
It looks like the darkness is won.
But this is the divine irony of the first gospel promise. The bruising of the heel is the very mechanism that crushes the head.
Because of the resurrection.
Yes. Jesus takes the full penalty of sin, the wrath of God against rebellion, into himself. He exhausts it.
So when he rises from the dead 3 days later, he hasn't just survived death, he has broken its teeth.
The empty tomb is the crushed head of the serpent.
The empty tomb is Genesis 3.115, fulfilled in history. I wrote that direct quote down from Velazquez's work, and it just gives me chills.
It is a stunning reality. But the narrative doesn't stop with the empty tomb. The timeline moves from the Messiah to the church.
Right.
The church is described in this framework as the community of the Messiah living in a very unique, tension-filled era. We live between victory accomplished and victory consummated.
So we exist in a state of mission and warfare, but it's a different kind of warfare.
We overcome not by political coercion, not by earthly power or cultural dominance, but by the blood of the Lamb, as Revelation 12:11 says.
This brings us to a really vital concept that Velazquez unpacks: the ongoing spiritual and historical conflict.
The enmity declared back in Eden, I will put enmity between you and the woman. That enmity is still happening right now.
The battle we face every day isn't just ideological. It isn't just sociological or political. It is a cosmic, covenantal reality. Okay, I have to stop you again and push back.
Oh, sure.
Because if I'm listening to this and I look at the news or I look at my own life, my friend who has cancer, the wars breaking out across the globe, the unbelievable cruelty humans inflict on each other, I have to ask.
It's the big question.
Right. If the serpent's head was decisively crushed at the resurrection, why is the world still so incredibly broken? Why do we still need to be in warfare if the war is already definitively won?
It is the great tension of the Christian life. Theologians call it the already but not yet.
Already, but not yet.
The serpent is defeated, yes, but he is not yet fully removed from the theater of history. The best historical analogy is the end of a major global conflict, like World War II.
Ah, the D-Day versus VE Day analogy.
Exactly. The cross and resurrection are D-Day. The decisive beachhead has been taken, the enemy's back is broken, the ultimate outcome of the war is absolutely guaranteed.
Right.
But VE Day victory in Europe, the final pacification hasn't arrived yet. Between D-Day and VE Day, there is still brutal, bloody fighting.
Because there are rogue factions in the countryside thrashing around, trying to inflict as much damage as possible before their inevitable end.
The enemy is thrashing. He knows his time is short. A snake with a crushed head can still bite with venom in its dying spasms.
Wow, yeah. And that is why we still experience pain, temptation, and death.
But the promise points us to the final judgment in Revelation 20 as the absolute certainty we hold on to. Evil does not just slowly fade away by neglect.
It is decisively overthrown by divine justice. The deliverer will return to judge, and evil will not have the final word.
Precisely.
Because we live in this weird, painful middle ground where the victory is legally won, but the enemy is still thrashing around and causing real damage in our daily lives. It is incredibly easy for us to misinterpret the story.
Oh, very easy.
We try to cope with the tension by twisting the narrative. And Velazquez highlights some very specific, dangerous ways we get this wrong. Let's dig into those common pitfalls, because I think we all fall into them.
The first major pitfall is moralizing the text. It's reducing Genesis 3.15 and honestly the whole Bible to a generic good versus evil fable.
Like treating the Bible as just a giant handbook of ethical lessons. Be a good person, tell the truth, and don't listen to snakes.
Right. It's a very comfortable way to read Scripture because it gives you a checklist, but this flattens the text completely.
The Bible isn't merely a mirror showing us our own moral struggle.
No, it is a historical, redemptive announcement of a coming person who will defeat evil on our behalf. When you moralize it, you lose the Savior.
Which leads right into pitfall number 2, minimizing the enemy. This is treating the serpent as only a metaphor, or maybe just a psychological symbol of our own internal bad thoughts or evolutionary baggage.
If you strip away the reality of a personal cosmic adversary, you lose the cosmic scope of the biblical drama.
Scripture consistently identifies Satan as the personal, intelligent adversary behind the rebellion.
The enmity is real. If you pretend the enemy is just an abstract concept, you won't recognize the warfare when it hits your actual life.
Then there is the pitfall of human triumph. I think this is the most common one today.
Oh, I agree.
It's the belief that the church, or that we as individuals, are the main characters. We are the heroes of the story who are going to save the world.
The church must never imagine it is the hero. Christ is the hero. We participate in the victory solely by our union with him.
So any theology, any church culture that makes our efforts, our political power, or our cultural influence the center of redemption has drifted entirely away from Genesis 3.15.
Completely.
I want to psychologize this for a second. Why are we so obsessed with making ourselves the hero of the story?
It's a human nature.
Is it because letting someone else be the representative, letting Jesus do the heavy lifting, requires us to admit that we are completely, utterly helpless on our own?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Human pride naturally recoils at the idea of antecedent grace.
We hate the idea that God had to act first because we were spiritually dead and incapable.
We desperately want to contribute something to our own rescue, even if it's just paying a fraction of the bill.
Yeah.
But Genesis 3.15 says, no, the deliverer will do the crushing.
You bring nothing to the table but the sin that made the rescue necessary.
Wow. That hurts the ego, but it is deeply freeing.
It really is. The fourth pitfall mentioned in this framework is misunderstanding death. This usually swings in one of two extremes.
Right.
Either we believe that death is just a natural part of creation, the great circle of life, dust to dust, it's all beautiful and natural.
Or, on the flip side, we believe that the ultimate hope of the Bible is just our souls escaping the physical body so we can float on a cloud playing a harp.
Both of those views are a profound misunderstanding of Genesis 1 through 3.
This is a crucial corrective. Think about it. If physical death is just natural, then mourning when someone dies is actually unnatural. We shouldn't cry at funerals if it's just the circle of life.
But we do cry.
We mourn because deep down, our souls know that death is an intruder. It is a violent enemy that vandalized God's good creation.
And the true hope isn't escaping the physical world. God created the physical world and called it very good. He isn't going to trash it.
The true hope is the physical renewal of creation and bodily resurrection.
Exactly. We mourn, but we mourn with hope because that intruder has been decisively defeated by the seed.
Right.
Okay, so if we aren't the heroes, if we can't save ourselves, and if we are living in this active, thrashing battlefield of the already but not yet, how exactly are we supposed to live on a Tuesday morning?
That's the real question, isn't it?
Let's bring this all the way down to the ground. What are the practical implications of Genesis 3.15 for the listener going to work, raising kids, or dealing with a crisis today?
Valasis breaks this down beautifully into a few key areas of daily life. First is personal faith.
Okay.
Genesis 3.15 teaches us to anchor our hope exclusively in God's promise, not in our own track record of self-improvement.
Which is huge, because when shame or guilt rise up, and they absolutely will, because we still fail, we still sin in this middle era, this promise is the only answer.
Faith isn't just being relentlessly optimistic about yourself. It's looking at your own failure and then looking at the seed who took the bruising for you.
Second, it completely changes how we view our own suffering.
As we discussed with the bruised heel, your wounds are not wasted. Suffering in the Christian life isn't meaningless, random cruelty.
By faith, your suffering is united to Christ's suffering. The bruise you are enduring right now is not the end of your story.
Third is discipleship and leadership. The notes define discipleship essentially as warfare against lies.
Because the fall in Eden started with a distorted word from the serpent, a lie about who God is, our daily walk requires doctrinal vigilance.
We have to learn to spot counterfeit wisdom in our culture.
And for leadership, whether you lead a family, a business, or a church, it means leading as a servant under the bruised but victorious King.
It isn't about serpent-like control, coercion, or manipulation. It's about cruciform service, leading by sacrificing yourself for the good of those under your care.
Finally, mission. This changes how we talk to others. Evangelism isn't spiritual salesmanship.
No, you aren't trying to close a deal or manipulate someone into a club. You are heralding the reality of a reigning king and offering a genuine rescue from deception.
Taking all of this together, Genesis 3.15 fundamentally changes our view of our own efforts. The Christian life begins and continues in total dependence.
We are not our own rescuers.
It's the difference between trying to swim across the Pacific Ocean by yourself versus resting in a lifeboat that has already been dispatched, has already pulled you out of the water, and is navigating the waves.
If you try to swim, the sheer exhaustion will drown you.
The work isn't the swimming. The work is trusting the boat when the storm is raging around you.
And in our mission, heralding to others who are still drowning that the boat is here and there is room for them.
So, as we wrap up this massive journey, where is this lifeboat ultimately taking us? We have traced a single beam of redemptive light from the darkest, most tragic garden in human history.
We've watched it burn through the covenants, survive the failures of kings, endure the exile, ignite at the cross, break out of the empty tomb, and sweep through the era of the church.
Where does the timeline end?
It takes us to the new creation. The visual maps we've studied trace this from eternity past all the way to eternity future.
The first Eden, the garden where humanity fell, becomes the pattern for the final, glorified city garden in Revelation 21 and 22.
The curse is finally lifted. There is no more death, no more mourning, crying, or pain. The serpent is permanently destroyed in the lake of fire.
The deliverer has come. The crushing is complete. Life is not random. Human history is not a meaningless cycle of violence. And the God who spoke into the absolute dark in Genesis 3:15 has not failed in a single one of his promises.
What was promised in the darkest garden is gloriously consummated in the radiant city garden.
We started this deep dive talking about God's judgment in Eden, where he looks at fallen humanity and tells them, "Dust you are, and to dust you shall return."
We naturally think of that as the ultimate bad news, the end of the line.
But consider this based on everything we've uncovered today. The ultimate promise of the Bible isn't that our spirits simply float away from the dust to escape this physical world.
Right.
The promise of the new creation, guaranteed by the crushed head of the serpent, is that God is going to take that very dust, resurrect it, glorify it, and dwell with it forever.
Forever.
If the physical world and your physical body are destined for that kind of eternal, indestructible victory, how does that change the way you treat your body, your neighbors, and the physical world around you right now today?